All right, get this. Today's deep dive is about something kind of meta.
Oh, meta how? I like where this is going.
It's about how the way we consume information, the medium itself, you know,
hmm
might actually be more important than the information itself. Wild, right?
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So you sent in that Wikipedia article on "the medium is the message." That phrase, it's from Marshall McLuhan.
Ah, McLuhan, way ahead of his time. So we're diving into his work today.
We are. We're going to decode what he really meant by that phrase and why it matters even more now with smartphones and the internet and everything. Ready to unlock some secrets about how we understand the world?
Absolutely. McLuhan's ideas are like a secret code to the information age, and his work is more relevant than ever. Let's do this.
Okay, so the phrase itself, "the medium is the message." It comes from McLuhan's 1964 book, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man.
Right, I've heard of it. Wasn't he talking about like television and radio and all that, how those things were changing society?
Exactly, but here's the thing. He had a really interesting way of using the word message throughout the book. Sometimes he'd write it as massage, like M-E-S-A-G-E.
And massage. What's that got to do with media?
Well, he also sometimes wrote it as message, like M-E-S-S space A-G-E.
Okay, now that's just playing with words, right?
It might seem that way, but it actually hints at something really important about how media can be disruptive, even kind of scramble our understanding of the world.
Yeah. Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. So what's the real deal with this phrase then? Because honestly, I've heard people use "the medium is the message" to say that content doesn't even matter. Like, who cares what's on TV as long as there's TV, right?
I've heard that too, and honestly, it's easy to see how people come to that conclusion. But that's not really what McLuhan was getting at. It's more nuanced than that. It's not that content is irrelevant. He's saying the medium itself, how that information is communicated, has a much bigger, often unseen impact on us. Like, think of a fish, right? A fish lives in water. It's so constant, the fish probably doesn't even think about it.
Right, the water's just there. It's
Yeah.
their world.
Exactly. Now imagine that water changes, gets warmer, maybe more polluted, whatever.
Yeah.
Even if that fish can't put it into words, those changes are going to massively affect how it lives, finds food, interacts with other fish.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So the water itself, the medium, it has this impact that goes way beyond any specific thing happening within it.
Precisely. We're like that fish, and all this technology around us, that's the water. And it's changing all the time.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But can you give me a real-world example of how this medium effect works? The article mentioned the light bulb, which seemed like an odd one to me.
It does seem strange, right?
Hmm.
Because a light bulb doesn't have content in the traditional sense. It's not telling you a story or giving you facts.
It's just light.
Exactly.
Right.
But think about how profoundly the light bulb has shaped our lives. Our sleep patterns, our work schedules, architecture even, all different because of the light bulb.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
The impact of the light bulb, the medium, goes way beyond just its basic function.
Yeah.
But what about when the medium does have clear content? Like television. The article mentioned that too.
Yeah, television, now we're talking. So how does the medium as the message apply to that?
Well, McLuhan said that TV, with its visuals, its immediacy, its emotion, it changes how we process information and how we form opinions. It's not just about what we're seeing on TV. It's about how the act of watching TV itself affects us.
Okay, I can see that. But how did he explain this? Did he have like an example or something?
He did. It's pretty out there. He used this analogy about a watchdog and a juicy piece of meat.
A watchdog and meat. Now I'm really interested. Tell me more. Okay, you've got to lay this watchdog analogy on me. I'm hooked.
All right, picture this. A burglar wants to break into a house, right? Best way to distract a guard dog.
Ooh, I see where you're going with this. Distract it with something else, something tasty.
Exactly. You toss it a big, juicy steak.
So we're the watchdog, the juicy content, that's the steak.
And the burglar is the medium itself, the PV in this case. It sneaks in while we're distracted and starts changing things up.
Okay, I like this analogy. It's vivid. But how does that play out with television, really? What's changing without us even noticing?
Think about the news, for example. McLuhan said it's not just the events we see, the specific crimes or whatever. It's the fact that we're watching this constant stream of often negative stuff right there in our living rooms.
Makes sense. It's like it's being beamed directly into our brains almost.
Right. It can make us more fearful, more cynical, even if we don't realize it's happening. The medium itself, television, it shapes how we see the world, just by its very nature.
And we're just sitting ducks, soaking it all in.
Wow, okay, so it's like how you were saying before, we're so used to consuming information a certain way, we don't stop to think about how that way of consuming is actually shaping us.
Exactly. Like that fish, oblivious to the changing water. And it's not just technology either. The article even mentioned cubism.
Cubism, like the art movement, how does that
It,
fit in?
McLuhan said that with a cubist painting, you can't just look at one part to get it. You have to take in the whole thing, all the angles, all at once, to see the complete picture.
I kind of see what you mean. So how does that relate to media?
Well, he said that each medium, just by its nature, forces us to experience the world in a new way.
So with cubism, it's like each brushstroke is its own little medium, changing how we see the whole painting. You got it. And this medium is the message idea. It pops up everywhere once you start seeing it.
Okay, but we can't talk about the medium is the message without talking about the internet. I mean, that's like the ultimate example, right?
Absolutely. If television changed how we see the world, the internet has, well, it's almost like it's rewired how we experience information altogether.
Right. But how? How does McLuhan's theory help us understand the internet's impact? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so first, think about the sheer volume of information we have access to now. It's overwhelming, really.
Tell me about it. It's like information overload 24/7.
Exactly. And that in itself changes things. Suddenly, it's not just about the content of the messages, it's about the fact that we're drowning in them.
And most of it is just noise, right? Trying to grab your attention, get you to click, share, buy, whatever.
Right. So it becomes harder to figure out what's actually important, what's true, what's trustworthy. And then there's the way the internet is structured. It's designed to keep us scrolling, clicking, constantly engaged.
Oh, totally. It's addictive almost. You start scrolling and you lose track of time.
Which brings us to algorithms. Talk about the medium is the message in action.
Ah, okay, yeah. Algorithms. They're like the puppet masters of the internet, deciding what we see and don't see.
And shaping our reality in the process. They create these filter bubbles, showing us more of what we already like, what we already agree with. It can really limit our perspectives.
It's scary how good they are at it, too. It's like they know us better than we know ourselves sometimes.
It's like the algorithm itself becomes a medium,
Yeah.
right? It shapes what we see, which shapes how we think, which then shapes what the algorithm shows us next. It's a whole cycle.
Whoa, that's trippy. We're trapped in this feedback loop of our own making. But it's not really our making, is it? It's the medium itself doing its thing.
Exactly. Remember that watchdog and the steak? Online, it's the algorithms tossing us those juicy bits of content, keeping us glued to our screens, while the whole structure of the internet is subtly rewiring our brains.
It's kind of terrifying when you think about it like that. It reminds me of something else I read in that Wikipedia article about Neil Postman. He had some pretty strong opinions about television.
Oh yeah, Postman. He was worried that television was actually making it harder for us to have meaningful conversations about important things.
Right, like it was prioritizing entertainment over substance, sound bites over actual debate. It's all about how things look, not what they mean.
And now look at us, with social media and everything being about going viral and getting likes. It's like Postman's fears about TV were just the tip of the iceberg.
It's like we're living in his worst nightmare. Everything's about grabbing attention, getting that instant reaction. Who has time for thoughtful discussion anymore?
It's overwhelming. And if we're not careful, we might not even realize what's happening until it's too late. Like, are we even thinking our own thoughts anymore?
It's a scary thought, but I guess that's why understanding all of this, understanding McLuhan is so important.
Exactly. It's not about ditching technology altogether. It's about being more aware, more critical of how we're using it and how it's using us.
So how do we do that? How do we become more aware of the water we're swimming in, like you said?
Well, for starters, just being mindful is huge. The next time you're scrolling through Twitter or watching the news or even reading a book, just pause for a second and think about the medium itself.
Ask yourself, is this shaping how I see this information?
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I really thinking about this, or am I just reacting the way the medium wants me to?
And what about if you mainly get your news from, like, Facebook?
Then you ask yourself, how are those algorithms shaping what I'm seeing? Am I getting the whole picture? It's about being an active participant, not just a passive consumer.
Okay, I like that. So it's not about swearing off all technology, but about being more intentional with how we use it, like choosing our media diet carefully.
Yes, a balanced media diet. Just like we make choices about the food we eat, we can make choices about the information we consume.
Instead of binge watching that same show, maybe pick up a book, call a friend, go for a walk, disconnect for a bit.
Maybe that's the key to really connecting with ourselves and the world around us. disconnecting to reconnect. This has been eye-opening.
It really has. It makes you think about things differently, doesn't it?
It does. So before we wrap up, what's one practical thing our listeners can do today to become more aware of how media is shaping their lives?
You know, McLuhan, he actually had a suggestion for that. Said the best way to understand a new medium like the internet is to, get this, study an older one.
An older medium? Like what? Smoke signals?
Not quite that old,
Yeah.
but think about something like silent film. We can see its limitations more clearly now, right? Because it's not the dominant medium anymore.
Okay, I see what you mean. So, by looking back at silent films, we can get a fresh perspective on how any medium shapes our perceptions. It's
Yeah.
like we're stepping outside the frame.
Exactly. And we can use that same idea, that same distance, when we look at how we interact with media today. Like, here's a thought. Try keeping a media journal for a day or two.
A media journal. What would I even put in that?
Just jot down the different types of media you're consuming, social media, news, podcasts, you name it. And then just, think about it for a sec. How does it make you feel? What kind of thoughts pop up? Does it change how you see a certain issue?
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Like holding up a mirror to our own consumption habits.
Yeah.
Could be a little scary, honestly.
Maybe a little, but also eye-opening. You might notice some patterns in your media diet, like maybe you realize a certain social media platform always makes you feel anxious, or that reading a book before bed actually helps you sleep better.
It's about paying attention to how it all makes us feel, not just what we're taking in.
Exactly. And once we start to notice those patterns, we can make more conscious choices.
Right. It's about taking back some control in a world that's just saturated with information.
I love that. Taking back control. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed by it all.
It really is. But we have more power than we think. We can shape our own media experiences. We just have to be deliberate about it.
This has been incredible. So much to think about. If you could leave our listeners with just one takeaway, one thing to remember about the medium is the message, what would it be? Don't just consume passively. Be curious. Be critical. And remember, every medium, from a book to a TikTok, it shapes not just what we think about, but how we think.
It's about understanding the water, right? And choosing our media diet carefully. And maybe even, every now and then, stepping out of the water completely for a fresh perspective.
Well said.
This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listeners, if you want to learn more about McLuhan and dive deeper into The Medium is the Message, we'll link to that Wikipedia article in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious.